My mother was a party girl. She liked to go out dancing a lot, and she used to take me with her instead of leaving me home with a babysitter. She would take me out dancing with her, and I would when I go to these parties with her, then I would watch what she and the rest of them were doing. At that particular time, they were not doing what we call the Lindy Hop. They were doing another style dance like Charleston and shag and breakaways and stuff like that. But whatever I saw them do, I would try to do it. And mother took me to a dance once where they had a big band, and I was sitting upstairs in the box, and she came upstairs and got me from the box and brought me downstairs on the dance floor and was dancing. I was dancing with my mother. So I thought I was really swinging, I felt good. I was dancing with my mother, man, and but I see everybody else moving around. But as soon as I walked off the floor with my mother, and I'm beaming, because I just finished dancing with my mother, right? So she looks at me and she says, "You will never be a dancer because you're too stiff." And that was the wrong thing to say to me. After that, I went out and bought records, and I came back to my room and started playing these records. Then I would take a broom, you know what a broom is, and a chair. I'd take one of these and I would be dancing with, I'd play the records and I'd dance with this broom on this chair, pretending that it was a girl, till I got nerve enough to go to a dance hall by myself. Now I have to tell you about this. I used to go, like on Sundays, there was like Sunday school for the young kids, like from 3 to 5. And in order to get to this church, I had to pass the dance hall. And the devil made me do it. So we'd go upstairs to the dance hall. Well, I was hearing the music, coming out there, and I'd be walking by, and I'd be standing up there. I'd walk a little distance. I'd walk a little further. Then I turned around and go back, and I went upstairs to this dance hall. So the first couple of times I go up there, I just stood on the side and watched all the other young kids dancing. Well, see, they had dancing up there, as I said, from 3 to 5 for youngsters. And they had the opportunity to dance to a very big band. In those days, they had bands like Claude Hopkins, which you probably never heard of. But he was a big name back in those days. And Mills Blue Rhythm Band, which at one time was headed by Louis Armstrong. And we would go to this dance, and they would have these big bands playing for the youngsters. So I would go up there, and I would go in there, popping, finger popping and everything. But then I saw these kids dancing, and I realized that I couldn't do anything that they were doing. And I was afraid to ask a girl to dance, because I was afraid she was going to say no. And generally, if a girl didn't know you, she was going to say no anyway, until she saw you dance. Then if you were a good dancer, she would go ahead and dance with you. And finally, there was a young lady that was living in my building that I would practice with like during the week. And then I enticed her to come up to this ballroom with me so that I would have somebody to dance with. And that was the beginning of my dancing career. Just taking off from Sunday school and going to dance. But in this ballroom, we had like 3 very large ballrooms. There was a number of ballrooms. Ballrooms in New York at that particular time was very numerous. But 3 major ballrooms in New York City were the Alhambra Ballroom, which is the one I was just speaking about, and another one that was called the Renaissance Ballroom. And the big ballroom was the Savoy Ballroom. Now this was like going from kindergarten to high school to college. You start in the Alhambra Ballroom, it's like kindergarten, youngsters dancing around, think they know everything. But then when they learn a little bit, they would go to the Renaissance Ballroom, which was the next higher level than the level that was danced at the Alhambra Ballroom. So we would dance around in the Renaissance Ballroom, and then somebody would say to you, "Well, let's go up to Savoy." And you would say, "Oh no, I ain't going to Savoy, because the Savoy dances are too good for me." So it took a while before anybody would say, "Well, let's get up for a little go up there. So we got a group together so that when we go to Savoy, we could dance with each other, and we wouldn't have to worry about them. Now in the Savoy Ballroom itself was like a block long or a street long. And they had two bands there. And one of the corners was like the north side of the corner, and one was the south side. Now the north side was like the #1 corner for the #1 dancers. All the best dancers were dancing on the north side. The dancers who weren't quite as good or didn't think they were that good would dance on the south side of the ballroom. So when we went up there, we walked over to the north side and we saw these guys up there swinging out. He said, let's go down to the south side. Because there was no way we could compete with what they were doing. At least that's the way we felt, because we knew that they were good dancers. And most of those people that danced in that particular northern corner, or they call it the Cat's Corner, they belonged to Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. And Whitey's Lindy Hoppers was known all over the city as the best Lindy Hoppers in the city. Now, I say the Savoy Ballroom, but there were ballrooms like all over New York City, from different parts of New York City, other ballrooms where other people danced the Lindy Hop. But if you wanted to do the Lindy Hop right, you would go to Savoy. There you can see it done right, plus you will be able to learn new things there. Because somebody was always coming up with another step. And you look at the step and say, wow, that's great, you know. Not to say that you could do it, but you look at it and say, that's great. So, as I said, we were dancing on the south side of this ballroom, and we stayed over there dancing for quite a while. And then Whitey came over and he approached me and asked me if I wanted to join Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. So I said, yes, of course. I mean, because it was an honor to join Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. Not to say you didn't have to pay any money to join it. It was just the idea of being in this particular group of people, Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. So when he asked me, I said, of course I want to join, you know. So he said, well, okay, come on over here to the north side. So I said, but what about my friends? He said, well, I just want you for now. I said, maybe they could come later. I said, well, if they come later, I said, well, maybe I'll come later too, because I don't want to go over there now. So I went back with my friends. So they asked me, they said, well, what did Whitey say? So I said, well, he asked me to join. And they were enthusiastic. They said, oh man, that's great. You're going to be one of Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. I said, but no, I turned them down. And they looked at me and said, you stupid fool. What do you mean turning down Whitey? I said, well, he didn't want y'all to come over there. So he said, well, look, man, if that had been me, I would have went. I would have left you, Jim. Forget it. So, but anyway, about 3 weeks later, Whitey comes back again. And he said, well, okay, you and your friends can come over to Whitey's Lindy Hopper, which we did, and we all joined Whitey's Lindy Hoppers at the same time. So you may, in one of these films, you'll see a girl, Norma Miller, and a fellow, Billy Ricker, which was from the original group that we first went up to Savoy together. And of that group, we lasted longer than any of the rest of Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. As a matter of fact, Norma Miller and I are still around. I think I'm around. Anyway, that was the beginning of my career as a Lindy Hopper. But when we first went into Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, we didn't go in there as to perform on the stage. We just joined Whitey's Lindy Hoppers to have fun among ourselves, to dance, enjoy dancing, and listening to these big, great bands that played at the Savoy. You know, bands like Basie and Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, all these big bands that come to Savoy. And because we belonged to Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, we could get in free. Which was a big plus, right? Yeah. So, and not only that, the bands that played at the Savoy would rehearse like during the day. So we had the opportunity also to go into the Savoy during the day when these bands were rehearsing. And we could practice our dancing, listening to a big band. I mean, we just practicing and they're practicing, so we listened to a big band, which is something that I'm sorry that you're not able to do, because it was quite a lot of fun to have a musician, you know, look at you and say, hey man, swing out, you know, and you start dancing and swinging, and he'll start blowing, And the harder you dance, the harder you would play. And the harder you would play, the harder you would dance. You know? So it was a playoff between the musician and the dancer. And it made it a lot of fun, you know. And it was like if I make up a step, or if I saw somebody else with a step, I would go over to that guy and say, hey man, show me that step. So he'd say, oh yeah, sure, bring it, you know, and he'd show me the step. If I had a step he wanted to learn, I'd show him a step. Then he might add a little something to the step I showed him. Or I might add a little something to the step that he showed me. And I'll do that step that he showed me in my style. And he'll do it, the step that I showed him in his style. So it'll be the same step, but it might look a little different. But the rhythm will always be there, the same rhythm and time, which is very important that you do. Try to keep up that, you know, that beat, that, you know. You know, you just got to feel that, you know, and just stay right there with it, you know. Don't let it get away from you, because it's too hard.